The wind cut through Denver's Union Station like a blade that February night, carrying with it the kind of cold that makes you question every decision that led you to standing outside at 11:30 on a Tuesday. Sarah Mitchell pressed herself against the building's exterior wall, trying to find shelter in the shallow alcove near the closed coffee shop, her hospital scrubs offering almost no protection against the dropping temperature. She checked her phone again, though she already knew what it would say. No messages, no missed calls, just the reminder that her shift had ended 3 hours ago, and she should have been home by now. The apartment she shared with 2 other nurses in Aurora was 40 minutes away by train, and she'd missed the last one. Her car had died 6 weeks earlier, the transmission finally giving out after 200,000 miles, and she hadn't been able to afford the repairs. Public transportation had seemed manageable until tonight, when an emergency C-section had kept her 2 hours past her shift, and the head nurse had needed her to stay and help with the post-op patient. Sarah never said no to staying late. She needed every hour she could get. She pulled her thin jacket tighter, mentally calculating whether she had enough in her account for an Uber. The math wasn't encouraging. Rent was due in 3 days, and she was already juggling which bills to pay first. Her nursing salary should have been enough. It would have been enough for most people, but student loans from a degree she'd finished 7 years ago took a third of her paycheck, and her mother's assisted living facility in Colorado Springs took most of what remained. She'd moved her mother there after the stroke, choosing the nicest place she could almost afford because her mother had spent 40 years as a teacher and deserved dignity in her final years, even if Sarah had to work double shifts to provide it. A black Range Rover pulled up to the curb about 20 feet from where she stood, and Sarah watched with mild envy as a man stepped out. He was tall, probably early 50s, wearing what looked like an expensive sheepskin coat over dark jeans and boots that had the worn-in look of actual work rather than fashion. His salt and pepper hair was slightly messed from the wind, and there was something about the way he moved that suggested someone accustomed to physical labor despite the luxury vehicle. He locked the car and started toward the station entrance, then paused, seeming to notice Sarah for the first time. She looked away quickly, not wanting to make eye contact. She'd learned in her years working night shifts in downtown Denver that looking approachable when you were alone at night was never a good strategy. But when she glanced back, he was still looking at her, his expression more concerned than threatening. He took a few steps in her direction, stopping at a respectful distance. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying a hint of a drawl that suggested somewhere further south or west. His tone was gentle, genuinely worried. "Are you waiting for someone?" "The station's closed for the night." Sarah straightened, trying to look less desperate than she felt. "I know," she replied, keeping her voice neutral. "I missed my train. I'm just trying to figure out my next move." He glanced at his watch, then back at her. "Next train doesn't run until 5:45 in the morning. That's 6 hours from now." "I'm aware," Sarah said, hearing the edge in her own voice and immediately regretting it. This stranger hadn't done anything wrong. "I'll manage," she added more softly. The man studied her for a moment, and Sarah became acutely aware of how she must look. Hospital scrubs with a cartoon pattern of stethoscopes and hearts meant to make pediatric patients smile, but doing nothing to project adult competence. A jacket that had been cheap when she bought it at Target 5 years ago. Hair pulled back in a ponytail that had started neat at the beginning of her 14-hour shift, but was now falling apart. She probably looked exactly like what she was, someone barely keeping it together. "Look," the man said carefully, "I don't mean to intrude, but it's going to drop below freezing tonight. You can't stay out here for 6 hours. Sarah felt a flush of embarrassment, mixed with defensive pride. I appreciate your concern, but I'll be fine. There's a 24-hour diner about 4 blocks from here. I can wait there. He nodded slowly, but didn't move away. I'm headed that direction. I could give you a ride if you'd like. No pressure. I just hate the thought of anyone walking alone in this area. This late. Every safety warning Sarah had ever heard about accepting rides from strangers flashed through her mind. Yet something about this man's demeanor felt genuine. He wasn't pushing, wasn't crowding her space, was giving her room to say no. Still, she shook her head. That's kind of you, but I don't accept rides from people I don't know. Smart policy, he agreed immediately. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, holding it out to her. My name's Jack Morrison. I own a ranch about 2 hours north of here, near Fort Collins. I'm in town for a livestock auction tomorrow morning. You can look me up if you want. Morrison Ranch. We've been in operation since 1873. Sarah took the card hesitantly, reading it in the dim light from the station's exterior lamps. The card was simple, quality stock with embossed lettering. Morrison Ranch, Jack Morrison, owner, an address and phone number. Nothing flashy, but something about the understated presentation suggested this wasn't someone trying to impress anyone. I still can't accept a ride, Sarah said, handing the card back. But thank you for the offer. Jack didn't take the card. Keep it, he said, and let me make a different offer. There's a hotel across the street, the Kimpton. I'll pay for a room for the night so you don't have to sit in a diner until dawn. You can rest properly and catch your train in the morning. Sarah felt something twist in her chest, a complicated mixture of gratitude and humiliation. I can't accept that either, she said quietly. I appreciate it, I really do, but I don't take money from strangers. It's not money, Jack said gently. It's a hotel room for a few hours. No strings, no expectations. I have a daughter about your age, and if she were stuck in the city in the middle of the night, I'd hope someone would help her out. The mention of a daughter somehow made it worse and better at the same time. Worse because it highlighted how pathetic her situation must look to this successful rancher who could casually offer to pay for a hotel room without blinking. Better because it explained his concern as paternal rather than predatory. Sarah looked at him properly for the first time, really seeing the weathered face, the genuine worry in his eyes, the stance of someone who worked with his hands despite clearly having money. "Why would you do that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know me." Jack was quiet for a moment, looking out at the mostly empty street. 5 years ago, he said slowly, my wife got caught in a snowstorm driving back from Denver. Her car went off the road about 30 miles from home. She was stuck there for 8 hours before someone found her. He paused and Sarah saw his jaw tighten. She was okay mostly. Hypothermia, frostbite on 3 toes. But a trucker who was passing by stopped and stayed with her, kept her warm, called for help. He probably saved her life. "I'm sorry that happened," Sarah said. "I'm glad she was okay." "She wasn't okay for long," Jack continued. "Cancer took her 2 years ago, but those 3 years we had after the accident were precious. And I never got to thank that trucker properly. He disappeared before I could track him down. So now, when I see someone who might need help, I figure it's my way of paying forward what he did for Kate." Sarah felt tears pricking at her eyes, which she absolutely could not allow. She was tired. She was cold. And this stranger's kindness was threatening to crack the careful composure she'd built over years of managing alone. "I work at Denver General," she said, not sure why she was telling him this. "I'm a labor and delivery nurse. I stayed late tonight because we had a complicated C-section and the new mother needed extra care. That's why I missed my train." Jack's expression softened further. "That explains the scrubs. I thought maybe you were a vet tech." Despite everything, Sarah almost smiled. Wrong kind of patience, though sometimes the new dads act like scared animals. Jack did smile at that, a real one that reached his eyes. My wife used to say the same thing. She volunteered at the hospital nursery for years, said the babies were easy. It was the grown-ups who needed the most help. They stood in silence for a moment, the wind picking up and carrying the distant sound of a train whistle from somewhere in the freight yards. Sarah knew she should walk away, should head toward that diner and spend the next 6 hours drinking coffee she couldn't really afford and trying to stay awake enough to be safe on the train ride home. But she was so tired, bone-deep exhausted in a way that went beyond just tonight's shift. "The hotel room," she said carefully. "Just to be clear, you're offering to pay for a room, nothing else. No expectations of company or conversation or anything beyond a safe place to sleep for a few hours." "Nothing else," Jack confirmed. "I'll walk you across the street, pay for the room, and leave. You'll never see me again unless you happen to need organic, grass-fed beef, in which case Morrison Ranch delivers to Denver twice a month." The attempt at lightness helped. Sarah took a deep breath, making a decision that went against every cautious instinct she'd developed. "Okay," she said. "Thank you. I'll accept your offer." The hotel lobby was warm and elegantly decorated, the kind of place Sarah had walked past hundreds of times but never imagined staying in. Jack spoke quietly with the front desk clerk, a young woman who didn't bat an eye at the unusual request for a room at midnight. He handed over his credit card, declined the offer of help with luggage since there wasn't any, and turned back to Sarah with a room key. "You're all set," he said, holding out the key card. "Room 412. Checkout's at 11, but you'll be long gone by then. The train starts running again at 5:45. Sarah took the key, her fingers brushing his hand briefly. "Thank you," she said, meaning it more than she'd meant anything in a long time. "This is incredibly kind." Jack nodded, then hesitated, as if he wanted to say something else. Finally, he pulled out his wallet and extracted several bills. Sarah started to protest, but he held up a hand. "This is for breakfast," he said firmly. "There's a restaurant here that opens at 6. You need to eat something before you go back to work tonight. It's not charity, it's common sense. You can't take care of patients if you're running on empty." Sarah looked at the money, then at his face. Something in his expression told her that refusing would hurt him more than accepting would hurt her pride. She took the bills, tucking them carefully into her jacket pocket. "I'll pay you back," she said. "If you give me your address, I can mail you a check." "Don't insult me," Jack said, but his tone was gentle. "You'll pay it forward someday when you're in a position to help someone else. That's how this works." He turned to leave, and Sarah felt a sudden panic at the thought of him walking away. "Wait!" she called out. He stopped, looking back at her. "Why are you really doing this?" "The story about your wife, I believe that, but there's something else." Jack was quiet for a long moment, his weathered face thoughtful. "My daughter," he said finally. "Rebecca. She's a teacher in Boulder. She loves it, works with special needs kids, makes barely enough to cover rent. I offered to help her financially, wanted to set up a trust fund, make her life easier. She refused, said she needed to make her own way, prove she could support herself on what she earned." He paused, pain flickering across his face. "We had a terrible fight about it. She said I was trying to control her life, said I didn't respect her choices. We haven't spoken in 8 months. Sarah felt something shift in her understanding. "You see her when you look at me. I see someone working herself to exhaustion, trying to maintain dignity and independence even when accepting help would make life easier," Jack said. "I see stubbornness that I recognize because it runs in my family. And I see someone who deserves respect for making hard choices, not judgment for struggling with the consequences." "Your daughter sounds like she has a good head on her shoulders," Sarah said quietly. "And she's lucky to have a father who cares enough to worry." "She won't return my calls," Jack replied. "Won't answer my letters. I send money to her school's supply fund under an anonymous name because I know she'd refuse it if she knew it came from me." He looked directly at Sarah. So, when I saw you tonight standing in the cold because you stayed late to help someone, choosing to wait 6 hours rather than spend money you probably need for something else, I thought maybe helping you was something Rebecca would approve of, even if she'd never know I did it. Sarah felt the tears threatening again. You should try one more time to reach out to her. Tell her what you told me. Sometimes people need to hear that their choices are respected even when they're hard to watch. Maybe, Jack said, though he didn't sound convinced. He glanced toward the elevators. You should get some sleep. You've got to be exhausted. Sarah nodded, but found herself reluctant to end the conversation. In the space of 20 minutes, this stranger had shown her more genuine kindness than she'd experienced in months, and something about his own pain made him feel less like a wealthy benefactor and more like a fellow human struggling with his own failures and regrets. Thank you again, she said, for everything. And Jack, she added, as he turned away once more, call your daughter, tell her you're proud of her. Even if she doesn't answer, leave a message. People need to hear that they matter, especially from the people they love. Jack looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You're a wise person, Sarah Mitchell. Your patients are lucky to have you. How did you know my last name? Sarah asked, surprised. Your badge, Jack said, pointing to where her hospital ID still hung from her scrub pocket. Sleep well. Sarah watched him leave, then made her way to the elevator. The room was beautiful, far nicer than anywhere she'd stayed in years. She showered in the marble bathroom, washing away the exhaustion of the shift, then collapsed into the impossibly soft bed. As she drifted towards sleep, she thought about Jack Morrison and his estranged daughter, about the complicated ways people tried to show love, and how often those attempts were misunderstood. She thought about her own mother, slowly losing her memories in that assisted living facility, and how Sarah visited every Sunday despite the 90-minute drive each way. She thought about the patient she'd stayed late for tonight, a scared 19-year-old having her first baby with no family present, and how Sarah had held her hand through the whole delivery because everyone deserved support during the hardest moments of their lives. When Sarah woke, it was just after 5 in the morning. She dressed quickly, making sure to leave the room as tidy as she'd found it. Downstairs, the restaurant was just opening, and she used Jack's money to order coffee and oatmeal, eating slowly and feeling more human than she had in weeks. As she prepared to leave for the train station, the front desk clerk called her over. Mr. Morrison left this for you, the woman said, handing Sarah an envelope. He dropped it off about an hour ago. Sarah opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a simple note written in neat handwriting. Sarah, I took your advice and called Rebecca. She didn't answer, but I left a message. Told her I was proud of her and that I respected her choices even when they scared me. Thank you for that push. Also, I left instructions with the hotel that you're welcome to stay here any night you work late and miss your train. The room is prepaid for the next year. Before you refuse, know that it's not charity. It's me being selfish, making sure someone like you doesn't have to stand in the cold because you chose to stay and help someone in need. You deserve better than that. Take care of yourself so you can keep taking care of others. With respect and gratitude, Jack Morrison. Sarah stood in the hotel lobby holding the note, feeling the full weight of his generosity and understanding. Part of her wanted to refuse, to maintain her independence, to prove she didn't need help. But she thought about what Jack had said about Rebecca, about how refusing help could sometimes be just another form of control, denying someone else the gift of giving. She thought about how many late shifts she worked, how often she'd waited in that same cold station or paid for expensive Ubers that destroyed her budget. She thought about her mother, about her patients, about all the ways her exhaustion made it harder to give them what they deserved. She folded the note carefully and put it in her pocket, next to the hospital badge that had given away her name. Then she walked to the train station, catching the first train east as the sun rose over Denver. On the ride home, she composed a text message carefully, sending it to the number on Jack Morrison's business card. "Thank you doesn't begin to cover it. I'll use the room when I need it, and I'll find ways to pay this forward. I hope your daughter calls you back. The world needs more people like you in it." The response came 20 minutes later. "The world needs more people like you in it. Go do good work. And Sarah," Rebecca called, "we're having lunch next week. Miracles do happen." Sarah smiled, tucking her phone away and watching the sunrise paint the Denver skyline in shades of gold and rose. She thought about chance encounters and unexpected kindness, about how sometimes the most meaningful exchanges happened between strangers who saw each other's humanity clearly for just a moment. She thought about dignity and sacrifice, about the complicated pride that made people refuse help even when they desperately needed it, and about the grace required to accept generosity without losing yourself in the process. 3 months later, Sarah would stay at the Kimpton for the first time after another late shift, and she would find a note from Jack waiting at the desk asking about her mother's health and whether the assisted living facility was meeting her needs. They would begin a slow correspondence, letters and occasional phone calls between someone who had lost the ability to help his own daughter and someone who understood what it meant to struggle alone. It wouldn't be romantic, at least not at first. It would be something quieter and more substantial, a friendship built on mutual respect and the recognition that sometimes the people who seem strongest are carrying the heaviest burdens. But that night, on the train heading home, as the city woke around her, Sarah simply felt grateful. Grateful for the unexpected kindness of a stranger who had seen past her pride to her exhaustion. Grateful for a warm bed and a hot meal when she'd been prepared for neither. Grateful for the reminder that goodness still existed in unexpected places, offered without demand for recognition or return. And as she rested her head against the train window and closed her eyes, she made a quiet promise to herself to remember this feeling, to look for the people standing alone in the cold, to offer help when she could, and to accept it when she needed it. Because that, she was learning, was how the world became a little more bearable. One small act of recognition at a time. One moment of genuine human connection in the vast loneliness of modern life. One stranger choosing to see another stranger not as a problem to be solved, but as a person deserving of dignity and care. And somewhere in the northern Colorado ranch country, Jack Morrison was probably doing the same, thinking about second chances and the unexpected ways people entered your life exactly when you needed them most, teaching you what you most needed to learn.